comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, 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 money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
So since it's been roughly 2 years since I've watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I'm going to watch it again so that I can make a solid review with an opinion that makes sense. And this footage is really overexposed. But we're going to watch The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and we'll see if it's as bad as I remember it being.
Many unbearable hours later.
Oh my god. On with the frickin' review, Jesus.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
Spider-Man is a very well-known character. He's had about 3 reboots in a matter of 10 years. People love this guy. He's insanely popular, and he's probably my favorite superhero. But there's a problem. Spider-Man is owned by Sony. You know, the guys who made such classics as the Emoji Movie.
Not only does this film hate its very subject matter, it's also the most hideous example of product placement in cinematic history.
Look, I back down on these guys a lot, and rightfully so. Sony's only intent is to make money.
Here comes the money.
But there's one thing that they've been trying to do for years. Make a Spider-Man cinematic universe. Which sounds terrible. Look, the reason why a Marvel and DC cinematic universe sound good is because those franchises have many characters, many antagonists, and many protagonists. Spider-Man has a couple protagonists, but many antagonists. What I'm trying to say is that a Spider-Man cinematic universe just doesn't work, and it's because there aren't enough properties and characters to keep it going that long. This is why the idea of a couple Spider-Man films works, such as a trilogy. A cinematic universe doesn't work because there isn't enough for other films to happen. Look at Venom. Sure, it was a financial success, but God, was it a bad movie. While that movie is trying to be the story of a villain and ends up becoming the story about a hero, Suicide Squad fails at this too. Neither of them know how to tell the story of a villain. It's just another story about a hero. What was the Sinister Six movie gonna look like? It would have flopped. But you know why The Amazing Spider-Man 3 and Sinister Six never happened? Because this steaming piece of crap, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. A complete and utter failure of a film in every way. A film that has no understanding of the character of Spider-Man. This movie got mixed reviews when it came out, and it did fine at the box office. Probably not as good as they hoped it would, but still did fine. But so many people have turned on this movie. And when it came out, it had its defenders, but now I never hear anybody defend this movie. I thought it was decent when I first saw it. Chris Duckman moved his rating from a B to a D. Well, it's kind of obvious why people started turning on this movie. People started to think about the movie. The same thing happened to me. I started to think about it. Last year, I'd have rated this movie probably about a 5 out of 10. Not a good rating, but still fine. And now, I probably rated about a 1 out of 10. But why? Well, I'm going to try to explain the best I can to explain it. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 fails on every conceivable level. Also, spoiler alert, as if you should even care at all. Reason number 1. It's way too confusing. This is a common thing in a lot of sequels. The writers have way too many ideas for the sequel. But oh my god, this movie makes no sense. It has, I think, 5 plot lines that are all completely separate. And they're all boring as heck. The first plotline is Peter and Gwen. I'm still really confused as to why in the first Amazing Spider-Man they thought, let's pick Gwen over MJ, because there's like no chemistry between Gwen and Peter. Isn't Gwen only here to be Spider-Gwen? I guess maybe they're gonna use MJ later, but why? But they made it work in the first one, so it should be good here, right? Haha, you thought this movie could do something good. This relationship here is just boring. The plot is basically them just breaking up and getting back together again. Peter is also just such a jerk here. When Gwen makes the reasonable point for them to move on with their life because she wants to go to Oxford in England, Peter's like, no, I love you too much for you to leave. I will follow you to the ends of the earth. And he ends up being the cause of her death. You did good there, Peter. They're just so boring. Plot 2. Peter and Harry. Oh my god, this freaking plot. These two have no chemistry at all. They're both just living their lives, and all of a sudden, the movie's just like, oh, okay, did you know these guys are friends now? And then they become friends and they start hanging out with no chemistry whatsoever at all. I like both of these actors fine. They both have been great. Andrew Garfield is doing terrible in this role, and he's done great in the past, but he's just bad here. But oh my god, Dane DeHaan is bad. He delivers some of these lines like he's in the Star Wars prequels. This
attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. So you might say that we are encouraged to love.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
plot is just so boring. I don't care. I don't care that he randomly started dying from a disease after his dad immediately told him that it was genetic. It's just boring. Plot number 3, Peter's dad, or parents, or whatever. This plot is the worst plot in the entire movie. That's an achievement. Nobody cares about Peter's parents. And why is this plot even in the movie? It literally goes nowhere at all. I guess it's there because they wanted to explain why the spider blood wouldn't cure Harry and why nobody else could become Spider-Man because I guess it was only in his bloodline. But they already said it wouldn't work. What's the point of that? That's not going to change anything. Maybe for future movies it was going to change things. But if they were trying to explain why the blood wouldn't cure Harry, couldn't they have just had it happen? It would have made sense. You don't need to have a whole plot and a whole stupid, really unsensible underground train that there's no way that train could have been hidden for, I don't know, how long it would have been, 20 years? Why is this plot in the movie? Oh, I guess there's also a plot with Peter and Aunt May. Who cares?
That's a question. That's a question.
Maybe this plot is here to make some comedy in this movie.
What happened to your face? It's filthy.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I was cleaning the chimney.
We have no chimney.
What?
And the final plot is between Electro and Peter. This plot is goofy as heck. Electro in this final fight looks absolutely hilarious. I understand the movie's PG-13 and they can't be like Watchmen where Dr. Manhattan is fully nude, but even though his electric face looks stupid as heck, he would have looked fine with the hood. This rubber suit just looks goofy. That's the best word to describe it. It's just goofy. And this plot as a whole is just goofy. They force it down your throat that this guy is a loser, and it is obnoxious. And Electro hates Spider-Man because he forgot his name? Or he took all the attention in Times Square? Or Spider-Man tried to defend the people who were getting hurt? What? Wait, what? As a whole, this entire plot just sucks. It absolutely makes no sense, and it's just goofy. So yeah, it's basically just a bunch of boring movies just smashed together. I don't care about these characters. I don't care about their problems. So this movie just becomes boring and stupid. Reason number 2, the CGI. For a movie with a $200 million to $293 million budget, The CGI is god awful. Sometimes it looks honestly laughable. The entire third act just looks like crap. All the designs of the villains just looks terrible. There really isn't much to say with the CGI. It's just awful. Just look at this one scene with Electro. Just look at it. It looks like crap. Reason number 3, the directing. Mark Webb is obviously not trying here. I mean, if you've seen him good in the past. Never actually seen any of his good movies. I've only seen this one, Amazing Spider-Man. But both this movie and the first have a very bad tonal problem. But this one is so much worse than the first. There's no color correction or change to it at all. They just filmed in New York, and it looks just bad. All the scenes feel like separate movies because they weren't filmed in a studio and weren't color corrected at all. So they all have different lighting. Why? Because they're too lazy to fix the freaking lighting, that's why. Reason number 4, the characters. It's kind of obvious at this point I hate these characters. Some of them are so bland that it's actually kind of hilarious. Let's go through them. Peter Parker. There are many reasons why they screw up this character. Let's compare Peter here to Peter in many better films. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1 and 2 and Spider-Man Homecoming. In Spider-Man 1 and 2 they play him as a complete dork who's a nerd, but he also happens to be Spider-Man. Not only does Tobey Maguire do great here, but he feels like Peter Parker. But Homecoming does Spider-Man the best, at least in my opinion. Peter is great here. Not only is Tom Holland doing great as Spider-Man, but they make him less of a dork and more of a mysterious yet awkward high schooler. He looks like he could be a popular kid, but he's also a science nerd. He's just perfect, and Tom Holland does great in the role. Now let's look at The Amazing Spider-Man 2. In here, he looks and acts like a jock, so he isn't a nerd like Tom or Toby. He's just a complete jerk, and he also doesn't look like a kid at all. He looks like he's 27. In fact, at the beginning of the movie, me and my brother were arguing whether they were graduating from high school or college. And it turns out they're graduating from high school. If you have to wonder about that, then you have failed. Like, wow. Aunt May. Aunt May is a character. Whatever. Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy's probably my favorite character in this movie. And that's not only because Emma Stone is by far the best actress in this movie, but she's actually the only interesting character in this movie. But there's not really much to talk about here. But she is still the only likable character. Harry Osborn. Boring. Already talked about him. There isn't really much to go into here on the characters that I haven't touched on already, so I'll leave it at that. But if you're wondering my opinion on other characters, just assume that I hate them and I think they're boring. But there's one final aspect that I must talk about. And the final reason this movie is awful, the marketing. I don't really blame this movie for this, but Sony screwed up here. This movie infamously has one of the most spoiler-filled trailers ever. This trailer basically tells us Gwen is going to die, and on top of that, these trailers marketed the movie completely differently than the one we actually got. The trailers represent this film as 3 villains who will unite in order to kill Spider-Man, but really, the movie's about one villain, and the other 2 both come at the ends, and they are never teamed up and never fight Spider-Man at once. The writer is put into this trailer like he'll be a big deal in the movie, when really he has about 5 minutes of screen time at the very end. I encourage you to go watch the trailer for this movie to see how fake some of the dialogue and the false plot points are showed here. It's disgusting almost. In conclusion, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is one of the worst comic book films ever made. This movie fails on every level possible. It has way too many plots. The action is terrible. The acting is terrible. As a whole, this movie is a failure in every way. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse successfully handles all of its plots and characters by making them all connected together. All of the other Spider people have the same goal, and Miles just wants to help them and keep a promise. There's essentially just 2 plots. There's the villain plot and the hero's plot. Spider-Verse doesn't separate it all out. It combines it in order for it to make sense. I understand this movie has the same writer as The Mummy 2017, but I actually like The Mummy more than The Amazing Spider-Man 2. At least it wasn't overly messy and had the charm of Tom Cruise to save it. This movie has neither of those things. This movie's only intent is to make money and set up a universe. I guess Sony left the idea of a Spider-Man cinematic universe behind since Marvel put Spider-Man into the MCU, but it seems like they want to do it again. Both Spider-Verse and Venom are here to set up universes. Venom already has a sequel plan, and Spider-Verse has not only a sequel plan, but a Spider-Woman spin-off planned. I loved Spider-Verse. It's one of the best superhero films of all time. So I'm down for any movies that go into this universe. It's obvious why Venom exists, to make the Amazing Spider-Man 3 a thing. But we don't need to have this. Venom 2 is on its way and there's no stopping it now, but we can stop Sony from ruining these characters. We as an audience can vote for better. We don't know what'll happen, but if Sony believes that they can make movies as bad as Venom and the Amazing Spider-Man 2, then I'm done seeing these movies. Marvel will do justice to this character. Spider-Man Far From Home actually looks really good, but the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the worst Spider-Man film yet. It's the only one to butcher this character. I hate this movie to my grave, and I hope Sony can do something on par with Spider-Verse next time. So yes, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is god-awful, but there are some actually good Spider-Man movies that exist. For instance, Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man 1 and 2, Spider-Man Homecoming. There are still good Spider-Man films. I'm not saying that they're all bad at all. I'm saying The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is bad. And in regards to upcoming epic reviews, I don't have anything planned. Don't expect anything. Just don't ask for another epic review, because I don't take recommendation. I just make them when I feel like they're needed. Right now, Far From Home is coming out in a couple weeks, so I thought I'll make an Amazing Spider-Man 2 epic review. And I know this epic review is easily the shortest, but that's because I edited it the most. So that's why. The other two were not very well edited. But this one I tried to edit the best I could. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. And I don't know exactly when the next epic review will come out, but don't expect it to be anytime soon. Bye.